All right, everybody, welcome to the Typical Sportsman podcast. I am joined today by Mr. Justin Spring of Pope & Young, and we're going to talk about the reinstitution of the bear hunt down in Florida. We're going to take a look at this as a win for conservation, as proof that the North American model of wildlife conservation works. And we're going to kind of talk about the decisions that took place in order to remove the bear season, why they are now reinstituting it. And they're reinstituting it based off of science-backed research that shows that they need to be hunting bears. So it is a massive win for us as outdoorsmen and hunters. We also talk about the importance of getting involved in issues like this. When it came to the public land issue, we saw this massive push on social media and from all these, influencers and organizations to get involved, let your voice be heard. But sometimes when it's a smaller state level thing like a bear hunt, sometimes we're not even made aware of it until after it's already been pushed through. And so we talk about making yourself aware of these things on a state level and how to get involved. We talk about taking a stand as one unified voice and the importance behind that. We also talk about how Pope & Young, along with other organizations, are constantly working on issues like this, are constantly looking at this and how does it affect wildlife, and is it a science-backed decision? Pope & Young has the beautiful point of view of looking at it from the eyes of bow hunters. How does it affect bow hunters? So whereas the NDA looks at things on behalf of deer, Rocky Mountain Elk Foundation looks at things on behalf of elk, Pope & Young has the benefit of looking at all of these different issues as how does it affect bow hunters? And I am a proud bow hunter. I am somebody who lives and dies for bow hunting. I absolutely love it, which is why I came out with the bow hunter tee. Tell everybody right off the bat, hey, I'm a bow hunter and I love it. So guys, I just want to encourage you to tune in and listen to this because you're going to learn something about the importance of getting involved in all of these issues. But we also just wanted to shed some light on why the decision was made in the first place to remove it, on why it was made to reinstitute it, and maybe what we can expect to see as things move forward. How are some ways that this could play out? How are some ways moving forward if they kill too many bears? What will happen if they're not killing enough bears? If they're killing the wrong bears versus the right bears, what happens as this moves forward? How do they continue to evaluate this and look at this? And how do they, moving forward, what will be the route that Florida should take in order to get the bears where they should be? Guys, it's an incredible episode. This episode is brought to you by my friends over at ScentLock. As we gear up for whitetail season, I am going through and building out my whitetail kit, and it consists largely of the BE1 series, which is the Bow Hunter Elite series. It is a toolkit built for bow hunters by bow hunters. They looked at everything. They looked at the pockets. They looked at the linings. They looked at how it fits and everything through the eyes of a bow hunter, and they built you a kit to work for bow hunting. So go check out the BE1 series as you get ready for fall. But here's what I want to tell you about ScentLock. In my opinion, it's the best whitetail gear you can buy, not because the pattern. Everybody has a lot of cool patterns. Everybody has a lot of cool camo out there. And camo is what it is. It breaks up your silhouette. But it's the best whitetail gear that you can buy for one reason: the activated carbon for maximum odor absorption. As whitetail hunters, we are so concerned about the odor. So why not have activated carbon in my clothing that is going to help me immensely with odor absorption? Guys, I can't tell you this enough. Go check out ScentLock as you're getting ready for this whitetail season. You will be glad you did.
For the true sportsman, it's more than a pastime. It's a way of life. Embrace the lifestyle of hunting, fishing, and the thrill of the wild. Live the life. Be typical.
There are a lot of great companies making a lot of great bows. Pretty much if you go buy a new bow today, it's going to be a good shooting bow. However, very few bow companies are still single family owned. Even fewer bow companies are Christian owned, which is a very important value to me. And third, very few companies are really looking to push the needle in innovation. That is why I align myself with Prime. Prime, when I made the switch to Prime and I got my hands on this RVX 32 right here, I spent so much time with that bow. I put so many arrows through it. I took it on several different hunts in several different climates and put it just through about anything you can put a bow through. And it performed in every way that I needed it to. It shoots really well. It balances really well, super high quality. The materials that go into it are great. And then in 2025 comes the form, which just goes to show you that Prime is really looking to move the needle in archery innovation, which is something that's important to me. So guys, that is why I align myself with Prime. I would highly encourage you to go to a Prime dealer and shoot the bows. I would highly encourage you to go to g5prime.com and check out their full lineup. Prime makes a phenomenal bow, but it's also a company that I can feel good about standing behind and supporting. So go check out Prime for your next bow. Justin Spring, man. Before we get into this, I have to tell you how happy I've been all week long, because we finally have weather in the 70s, and it's been like unreal.
Dude, it's actually been raining here all day today.
Oh, it's been raining all week, drizzling on and off, but that doesn't matter because it's in the 70s. I had to put a hoodie on and take my kids to school the other morning. I was like, this is stinking awesome, dude.
No, we needed it. We were getting a little dry. Had a lightning storm come through and kicked off a few fires, but this should squash those pretty well.
Yeah, I was talking to one of our partners from Utah today, and I was telling him, I'm like, man, I wish it quit raining. And he's like, dude, we're finally getting rain, and I hope it doesn't stop raining. And I'm like, yeah, we're in a little more of a predicament than you are, though. Like, we're having flooding all the time. It's been the craziest summer ever, dude. And I mean, I know I was telling you some facts the other day about like how much rain we got, and like it's been I've never seen anything like it, dude.
Yeah.
I'm super curious, and I don't want to get too far off track because we're here for a reason, but I'm super curious to see what happens with the deer, and how it's not going to hurt them. That's not what I'm saying. But, a lot of times here in Kansas, it's all about the water. I mean, if you've got water on your property, then the deer stay there. If not, they move. And, so I'm super curious to see what happens. I mean, I could either have more deer than normal, or some deer will hang out, by the ponds they had longer or something. I don't know. So it'll be interesting.
Should spread them out a bit.
Yeah, for sure, man. Now we are proud of what has taken place in Florida. If you have been following along, Florida reinstituted a bear hunt. Now, before we talk about how much of a win for conservation this is, and how this goes to show that the North American model of wildlife conservation works, before we get into all that, give us a history of the population of bears in Florida. When did the decline start? Why did it start? Just kind of, because if you think bear hunting, you never really think Florida. At least I haven't in the past, but maybe now we need to start thinking about Florida. So kind of walk me through the history of bear in Florida.
Well, I mean, Florida, obviously, a lot of the areas, there's big, areas that are not inhabited, but most of Florida's wildlife kind of took a pretty big hit. I mean, we had the key deer down there, that were almost driven to extinction. Just the people down there push populations down. Bear hunts, the black bear is actually a very resilient animal. It's not quite as good as the white-tailed deer, but pretty close at adapting to live around people. That obviously there's a bunch of people in this country now, meaning the black bears are able to make a living around that. And all through the Southeast, we are seeing increasing bear populations, states having new hunts. Overall, they're doing well. Well, the issue we had in Florida, that the hunt wasn't taken away due to a population decline. It was a public sentiment. I believe a decade ago was when they had their last bear hunt. And again, it wasn't a science-driven answer. It was a popularity contest type deal. And the bears just, the folks down there, the voting folks, how they decide their seasons, they did not want to have a bear hunt, and so it went away. It's a very similar situation in New Jersey. Some years there's a hunt, some years there's not. At the end of the day, though, I mean, what generally always happens is there's increased conflict. again, bears are able to live around people, and living around people, they get into garbage cans, they knock stuff over, they raid pantries. I mean, they get themselves into a little bit of trouble. And so generally what you'll see is when these conflicts increase, the public sentiment not wanting a hunt kind of goes away and they put it back in. All said and done, though, what Florida did, I mean, the science shows that regulated hunting helps maintain these populations. There's not been a species in North America that has been, driven down or driven to extinction or even to peril from regulated hunting. You hear people say, oh, these animals were knocked down from hunting. Well, it was more likely than not unregulated and poaching. Regulated seasons do not have an adverse effect on species. And so, what Florida did, like you alluded to, this is a big win for conservation. This is following the science, and this, this gives the state of Florida the opportunity to manage some of these bears.
In fact, managed seasons have the opposite effect. And, you talk to guys like Kansas is a perfect example of this, because I get to talk to guys that remember when there was no season, that remember when you couldn't hunt deer, and they remember those first seasons, and they talk about how, like, man, we remember like it being like a massive deal if you just saw a doe like on the side of the road. Like it wasn't, it was like, I saw a deer today, like holy cow. And now, of course, I mean, you drive to dinner one night and you might see 50 deer in a field, or, as you drive, to the next town over, you'll see deer in every field. And it's the perfect example of when you let the science-backed research mandate your seasons and what should be killed when, why, and how, maybe we are going to get into that here in a minute. For all you thugs out there that have been arguing about, is it a privilege or a right? We're going to get there in a minute, but it just goes to show that when you let science-backed research dictate your seasons, it improves the herd. And Florida is a good example of that. Now, I was actually going to bring up New Jersey. I wonder how many states. New Jersey's a big one because they have mega giant bears and everybody's like, I want to kill them. But I wonder how many states have a population that should support a season for bears and they don't have a season for bears. Is Florida the only one and New Jersey the only ones that off the top of your head?
I guess I'm not positive. I mean, I know there's a few states that don't have a viable population, they're just not habitat for them, but I don't know of other ones that have a thriving population that are not managed. Those are the two that come to mind.
Yeah. Yeah. Again, New Jersey's a big one just because like there are some mega giant bears, and, it's a topic of discussion because everybody wants to go hunt them and they can't most times. So now what was the decision making process for Florida to reinstitute the bear hunt?
Well, I mean, it went through their commission, and then that was the vote, as it was proposed, I believe, May of last year. And then it had a final vote for season by the commission, and it passed unanimously. So, each state's got a little bit different process. In Montana, we actually can have legislative modifications of the seasons that are kind of forced onto our fishing game, whether they really support it or not. Commissions can have a problem too, but in this case, it sounds like the commissioners all greatly supported the idea, and it did pass unanimously.
All right. Now, here's a question that might get dicey. Why is it that with a vote like this to reinstitute the Florida bear hunt, why is it that it was not as public and as heard of as the public land issue that recently happened? Why is it that, it's kind of like you hear about it after the fact rather than everybody going to bat for the bear hunters in Florida and for the bear seasons to be reinstituted in Florida? Why is the public lands deal and other issues, but that's the most recent one. Why is it that some issues are so incredibly pushed to the public as far as, let your voice be heard, write to your legislators? Why is it that some topics are so incredibly pushed, but then things like the bear hunt, most people don't even hear about it until it's like, hey, there's a new bear season in Florida?
I think the biggest reason that we see kind of this disparity is just realistically how many people are affected. This is the state of Florida. Yeah, there's a fair number of hunters in Florida, but when we compare it to something such as the public land issue that affects all the western states, that, not only do you have the hunters that live there, you have the hunters traveling there as well. I think that's why public land was probably more heard about, and realistically, I mean, we do our best to stay on top of it, but there's a lot of state level issues that come up and get voted down that never really make it to the national stage. So I don't think it's uncommon that we didn't hear a lot about this Florida bear season.
Yeah, it's definitely not uncommon. And that on the episode I did with Sam Solholt, we talked a lot about that of like, sometimes we tend to kick up our heels and say, all right, we won. Like they didn't take our public lands. But yet there's all of these other battles and all of these other attacks and all these other issues that need to be addressed. And the public lands deal was such a beautiful thing because you saw every single it didn't matter if they hunted Daddy's farm in Missouri. They still spoke up and still let their voice be heard. And that's why it was such a powerful push. And I just wish that we could, as hunters, and especially, us as bow hunters, I just wish that we could stand on one unified front and, hey, I may never go hunt bears in Florida, but I still want to stand up and support them because, one day if my season's under attack, I want the bear hunters in Florida to stand up and support me. And so I just want to encourage the listener to not only care about the quote unquote big issues, or not only care about what might affect you or what might affect where you hunt, how you hunt. But if we would stand together and care about every single issue, then, once we let them know, hey, it didn't work in Florida, it ain't going to work here. And we'll stand as a unified front, man, it will just make a world of difference. So what does it look like as these seasons are reintroduced? What does that look like, A, to the overall population of the bears, but B, also to the seasons, to the bag limits, to the, number of tags that are sold? How does that kind of evolve over time?
Well, I mean, anytime you have a season, you come out with a conservative estimate. Florida, I think, is doing 187 tags. That's going to be split over 4 regions of the state. You're going to have to draw. Non-residents can put in as well as residents. Non-resident does have a higher fee. But you're going to look at, your population. You're going to look at what happens and say, okay, let's say hypothetically we kill 105 of them. Okay, well, do we see a drop in conflict? Do we see, decrease in complaints? Do we see an increase? Does that mean we didn't take enough? And so that's what these state agencies are doing. Everybody likes to sit back and crucify the poor state biologists, but man, they're taking all this information and trying to give you the best scientific review of what's going on, from that. Wolves is another hot topic, and they're managed in some of the western states on a quota. That's what dictates what we do on the harvest to make sure that we're not imperiling a species or reducing their viability. And if animals are getting taken and not counted towards the quota, that becomes very problematic, because then you may not be able to even track. You think you killed 200 wolves. Well, if there's actually 400 that were killed, the state can only account for 200, and that's how they have to make their decisions.
Yeah. So what does this look like? What does it look like for the quality of bears that we can hopefully expect to see? I mean, are they going to be not as healthy because they haven't been managed? Are they going to just be a bunch of toads coming out because nobody's killed them for 10 years? What can we expect to see as quality of bears coming out of Florida?
Well, time will kind of tell. I mean, an overabundance of a game species in general would cause them to be smaller if they were limited in resources, but we don't know if a black bear in Florida is resource limited because of population or not. Generally speaking, the bears that are in areas that don't have to hibernate as much, generally speaking, do have bigger skulls. And bigger skulls at a younger age. You look at a lot of the giant bears, and they're from places that doesn't get all that cold in the winter. Perhaps that'll happen in Florida. Time will kind of tell. We don't really know what we're going to see.
This might be a stupid question, but I'm okay to ask the stupid questions. Are there states in which bears don't hibernate at all just because it doesn't get cold enough?
a bear doesn't go into true hibernation, right? If it gets
Right.
warm, they'll get up, they'll move around a bit. There are states, Oregon, for example, where I grew up on the coast. I don't think I saw snow until I was in like third grade. Those bears don't have to. I mean, no, they're not. They're not denning. They're not hibernating. I mean, they'll get real lazy and sleep. I mean, I saw one leaning up against a tree in the middle of the winter and like just kind of wandered off. But no, they weren't truthfully in a den, in snow or whatnot. So, and that's, Oregon's not that far south. I'm sure there's plenty of bears that go all year without really, truthfully going into a true hibernation situation.
Gotcha. We talk a lot about our favorite bows, about our favorite camo, our favorite arrows, and we invest a lot of money into the gear that we use. Listen, that investment does not matter if you're not healthy enough to get out in the woods. That investment of your camo does not matter if you can't make it up the mountain to where the elk are. One of the best investments you can make is investing in your health, investing in the longevity of you as a hunter. Guys, Mountain Tough is truly changing lives of people all around the world. It's changed my life. It's changed lives of people like Mr. Randy Newberg. His testimony about Mountain Tough is absolutely phenomenal. He's even partnered with them to help make a program for people 50 and over because he's so passionate about what it's done for him in his life. Guys, Mountain Tough truly is incredible. And I want to give you a chance to try it for 6 weeks completely free. When you use the code TYPICAL, all caps, typical, you're going to get the original 14 days free. But then you're also going to get an additional 30 days free. 6 weeks of free training. Give it a shot, give it a try, and just see. I promise you in that 6 weeks, you'll feel better. You'll perform better. You'll look better. Everything about your life will improve if you just give it a chance. If you don't like it at the end of that 6 weeks, no harm, no foul. But I want to give you a chance to try it free for 6 weeks. Again, Mountain Tough, use code TYPICAL, all caps, and try it for 6 weeks completely free. So walk me through a couple different scenarios that could happen as this bear hunt in Florida takes off. Walk me through a couple different scenarios if they kill enough and the complaints cease, if they kill enough and, there's still a bunch of complaints if they, kill enough and the herd, the population suffers. Walk me through a couple different things that could happen as this season takes back off.
So what we don't really want to have happen is literally they do the one season, the 187 tags are issued. We go to absolutely no complaints. That means it was too aggressive of a harvest, right? We want to see a decrease in it. We'd hope that maybe, there's bears do have learned traits. There is particular bears that, figure out how to raid garbage cans and cause more problems than others. You're hoping that this season would perhaps remove a few of those problem individuals, if you will. But realistically, what we'd love to see is that, say that the complaints go down 10% with a limited harvest like this, so that the state can then go back and say, okay, removing some of these bears was successful. We saw a slight reduction in conflict, knowing we're never going to get to zero conflict unless a bear population is eradicated, which obviously we don't want. What you want to do is just figure out over the next few years what that number is to where the public's satisfied with the likelihood of an encounter. That's what we're trying to get to, and that's what success looks like, is plenty of bears on the landscape and people are happy that they're there. That's what you want. That's the best situation.
Yeah. So as the complaints go down, we hope they issue more tags, and then complaints continue to go down. They issue more tags. Now, with something like this, how I don't know the term I want to use here. How under the scope do you think it's going to be? Do you know what I mean?
Oh, I mean, there's state biologists that are tasked with just analyzing populations. They're going to look at things too. If they're doing den surveys, like, okay, what is this? I mean, they'll go in and find, how many cubs a sow's having. Is this season at this time causing an adverse effect in cub production? This stuff's all very looked at, to the best of the abilities of all the states. And it's like this across, the entire country. Generally they'd like to watch them more if they had more funding is usually the hang up. It's not a lack of desire. It's a lack of funds to really track some of these things as tightly as they'd like to.
That's actually what I was going to ask you was, other than just surveying the yuppies and asking them like, all right, is your Honda Accord still getting broken into? What are some of the other things that they would survey to see if this hunting season was a success?
I mean, most states that do any type of bear season or whatnot, they check in bears. They take tooth for aging. They, what we want, we don't want to have a bunch of young bears on the landscape. We also don't want to have a bunch of just ancient bears. You want that good population dynamic with your old mature bears and also your recruitment into the next years. It's a balanced, that's the goal. We're trying to get a balanced, healthy bear population in the face of however many million people live in Florida, and that's the challenge of wildlife management and giving Florida the tools to remove some of these bears with a limited season, for those of us that support the North American model and scientific management of wildlife and put a lot of credibility in the reason we have the wildlife we do today in this scientific approach. It's, obviously a huge win and exactly what we want to have happen. And I'd argue it's about the only way that you're going to have healthy and robust wildlife populations in the face of, expanding human population, which, we know is happening. It's got to be taken care of.
Yeah. Just so everybody knows, what kind of role, when something like this happens, what kind of role does Boone and Crockett and Pope and Young play?
I mean, we want to come out. We want to support the move. We want to support the North American model. Honestly, it's something that I would have, it didn't get brought to our radar in time until it kind of already had come out. And I kind of, am a little disappointed we couldn't help it. Fortunately, it went the right way, but it's staying on top of these issues. It's commenting where we can, pointing out the wins and then revisiting this in a few years. Like, hey, you remember the big uproar when this season or whatever, was first initialized? Let's look at what really happened. Has it been successful, or is there something we should be doing differently?
Now, how long does it take? Or what's the time frame that Pope and Young and Boone and Crockett would need to be able to look at the data and see the increase in skull sizes? Obviously year one, the only thing we have to measure it to is, again, a decade ago, what was being killed a decade ago. So how long does it really take? 5 years, 10 years, 15 years to be able to look, okay, in 2025, when it was reinstituted, where are we at now from that point? How long would that, kind of time frame need to be in order to really truly see that?
That's hard to say. Where are you starting from? If it's a situation where this removal of the bears that they're proposing for this season really frees up some resources, it might be a lot quicker. If the state's bear population is being suppressed by older boars killing a bunch of the cubs, we may not see much of a change at all. Just an actual increase in the number of bears on the landscape. So those, even after taking out 180, you could see an increase in, those complaints that we were talking about, because all of a sudden these bears that were killing all the baby bears, they're off the landscape. So your population could increase, in which case, obviously, we need to take significantly more bears. So, again, it's until you really see it in action and are able to watch it, it's kind of hard to say what the effects are going to be. About the only thing you can definitively say is that they've said it conservatively and it will not, hurt the overall population in any way, that could be predicted.
But is that going to have the adverse effect if after this first season, some big boars are killed and then all the yuppies see, well, we're having more problems, not less. So the hunters are pushing them out of the woods into the towns. Like, that's not what's happening, but could it have the adverse effect and them say, Oh man, we tried to introduce a hunting season and look what happened. Like we have more problems now, so let's just take it back out.
I mean, certainly it could, and that's the problem you have with a lot of these knee-jerk wildlife decisions is there's incorrect assumptions made. Black-tailed deer populations on the West Coast survive on, early successional forests and during, a lot of the reduction in federal timber harvest out west, the deer didn't have any food. And, people were saying, oh, all the logging hasn't given the deer a home. Actually, the reason we had so many deer was all the logging was giving them an endless buffet of food. And so, yeah, it's always a challenge. And generally, it's an incorrect hypothesis that is putting a season in or taking it out, which is why it was probably banned in the first place. This idea that the removal of this many bears is going to have an adverse effect is just not correct. And so, and yeah, 100%, you never know what the proverbial straw is going to be that tips something over the wrong news story, the wrong angle on a news story that goes viral. 100% could turn a season completely the wrong way.
Now, how do the biologists go? What's their proving ground, if you will? How can they prove like, no, it didn't, that wasn't the issue. The issue was, look at these were all, 16-year-old bears that were killing cubs that were killed last year. That's why there's more cubs, more bears. How can they go about showing that?
I mean, they're going to collect the best data they can. They're going to, work with other different states, other bear biologists and say, hey, what are some of the things that you saw in your state when a season was instituted? What have you seen with increased harvest or decreased harvest? They're going to do the best to have the data that they can and then present that to the public, and it really comes down to the public, whether or not they're going to put credibility in what those biologists are saying or if they're going to just, kind of ignore them.
Speaking of age of bears, do you know what area of the U.S. the bears get oldest in?
No, I mean, the biggest bears are, when there was aging available, they're 20 plus years old. I mean, my guess would be, I honestly don't know. I can't think of an area that's statistically older bears or anything like that.
Well, the old Google machine says that the oldest bear ever documented was Minnesota. Not necessarily that's, that grows the biggest ones historically. But that bear lived to be 39 and a half years old, apparently. Which is pretty stinking crazy. I want to talk real quickly. Jim Willems, not too long ago on the podcast, and I've done a video about this since, made the statement that hunting is a privilege and not a right. And everybody lost their minds. And I even called you and told you that I was kind of conflicted because as a Bible-believing Christian, it's easy to say, well, hey, it's my God-given right. However, the conclusion that I've came to is that the God-given right that we have is to consume animals that were put here. However, it is our privilege to get to go in the field and use the equipment that we choose to use and harvest those animals ourselves. Because even if they made hunting, every form of hunting illegal tomorrow, it would still be our God-given right to eat beef from the store and chicken from the store and you name it. And this is a perfect example of that. The people of Florida lost their privilege to bow hunt for bears. The animals were put there as a natural resource. However, because of problematic bears and because of people, being sensitive and not wanting to see cute little bears die, they lost their privilege to hunt those bears with bows. So give me some clarity. Give the listener some clarity as far as what it means that hunting is a privilege and not a right.
Well, I mean, At the end of the day, if we're debating if it's a God-given right or right to every human or whatever, truthfully, that only is really ensured if that is written into some type of document, such as our Bill of Rights. As it sits now, there is some states that do grant their citizens the right to hunt, but that is not a nationwide thing, and so it is indeed a privilege if it's not guaranteed you as a citizen this right. It is, it basically becomes a privilege. And how wildlife is managed and the fact that it's managed for the public trust by the public overall, it's every citizen's. Our country gives every citizen the right to the wildlife. The fact that the non-hunting public allows us to utilize some of these game animals is in fact a privilege and not a right. And so from a legal standpoint, unless you're in a state that has a constitutional right to hunt, it's clearly a privilege.
Now, I had somebody bring up an argument that made a lot of sense to me, because the definition of a privilege is something that has restrictions. It can be taken away. There is a governing authority over it. Anyways, that was the point I was making. And somebody said, well, it's our right to bear arms, but there are still restrictions put on guns. So if we're going off the definition that it's restricted and it's mandated, and then owning a gun is a privilege as well. However, we have the right to bear arms. And I honestly didn't have a good answer. I'm like, man, honestly, it was one of those times I'm like, hey, that's a really good point. I'm not going to argue with you on that, because that's a really valid point. And my point to that is that, because he made the point of like, well, if you are incarcerated, you can no longer have a gun. And so that would, by your definition, be a privilege, is what he was saying. But a right is something, I don't know. It's a challenging thought. What would be your response to that?
To not get in the debate of, are any current gun regulations already in violation of the Second Amendment, which we don't want to go down that road. It's a hard one to answer. By some definitions, if the right to bear arms is undeniable in all circumstances, perhaps some of those may not actually have a legal basis. I'm not saying that's good or bad, but if to that statement, a right is, it's a hard one, but like I said, at the end of the day, hunting is regulated. Hunting is a privilege. The percentage of the non-hunting public that supports it, they allow us the right to hunt these animals and to utilize this on, in some cases, in most cases. And so, by that, it is purely a privilege.
Yeah. And I just want to make the note that it's okay to have these conversations. Like, well, I'm not trying to tell you, and I'm speaking to the listener here, when these types of discussions come up, it's not like you're wrong, you're stupid, I'm right, listen to me. That's not it at all. I just wish, and Justin has a beautiful way of challenging me on things, not in a way to say, Dylan, you're an idiot, you've been wrong your whole life, but in a way to just get me to think about things and get me to consider things. And that is all I'm trying to do. I'm trying to get you to think about things in a way that might make you stop and look at them a little differently. It's not to say, hey, I'm some brilliant guy, because I'm a dumb redneck from Arkansas. It's not to say I'm some brilliant guy and I think about things in such an incredible way. It's just to get people thinking, to get people considering, to get people to consider the why behind things. And the why behind this is that Florida is the perfect example. We have the privilege to hunt, and we want to do everything that we can to protect that privilege, because it can be taken away. Florida is a perfect example that it can be taken away for no good reason other than it made somebody feel bad. So that's all I wanted to do, is just kind of clear the air on that. We're not trying to say that Pope and Young is the standard for what is right and what is wrong. We're not trying to say that we're the standard of lawgivers here. We just want you to consider things in a way that will challenge you, that will that will help you as a bow hunter grow, and how you communicate these things with people, in your understanding of them as you go into a conversation with somebody. That was really all that was there. So, Justin, what do you expect to what's the next? Is there anything else on the docket that people should be made aware of, that maybe, again, it's not one of the quote unquote bigger issues like public land and people haven't been paying attention to it? Is there anything on the radar like that you would say, hey, make sure and make yourself known, aware of this?
I mean, they happen. They happen constantly. There's all kinds of issues that are coming forth in numerous states, basically challenging scientific validity of the scientific management of wildlife. There's ideas that come up that people think, hey, this is a great idea, I'll go through this legislatively. Make sure that the decisions and the way that your wildlife management, your state's being driven, is coming from, or at least, at the blessing of the managing organizations that are tasked with actually ensuring that those animals have, the protections or the habitats they need. I'm trying to think, in my home state of Montana now, we don't have, our legislature meets every 2 years, and so we're in a non-legislative year, so it's kind of quiet here. But every time something like that comes up, you got to stay on your toes, and there's a lot of great state level organizations, national organizations. Kind of to your point a little bit earlier, Dylan, about all of us standing on, bow hunters standing united. Well, and it goes even bigger, and that's all hunters and outdoor recreationists, and that's that AWCP group that a lot of people don't hear a lot about, but this is a group of all the critical groups, everybody comes to the table. That 99.9% of what we're doing is the same across the industry, whether you're worried about mule deer or elk or whatever it may be. There is a group that we have a seat at the table where anytime an issue comes up, there's some type of letter or statement made by the wildlife field. That comes from the WCP sign-on letter that all these organizations have the ability to be a part of. And so, just kind of an informational thing. Pope and Young does have a seat at the table. We were one of the founding members of that group. And so we do have the voice of bow hunters. Every time something comes out, we are asked, hey, from Pope and Young's perspective, do you guys want to sign on? Is this something you want to be a part of? And that's a big voice. People wonder, why should I be involved in Pope and Young? It's those type of conservation issues and that unified front as hunters that we need to maintain to ensure things like Florida, they have the ability to get it back.
And that's what, as a bow hunter, and I'm a bow hunter by the way that my shirt says, as a bow hunter, I value the fact that I have someone who only is interested in how does this affect the bow hunter. Now, don't get me wrong. I think that if you're a deer hunter, you should belong to the NDA. If you're an elk hunter, you should belong to Rocky Mountain Elk. If you're a duck hunter, you should belong to DU. If you're you name it. You should belong to those organizations, because just as in the same breath, as a deer hunter, I want somebody who is looking after my best interest as a deer hunter. But as somebody who identifies as a bow hunter, I want there to be somebody who is saying, well, how does this affect bow hunting? Not the deer population, not just the deer population, not just the elk, but how does this affect bow hunting? And that is Pope and Young. Pope and Young is for lack of a better phrase, the premier bow hunting conservation organization in North America. So just as, Rocky Mountain Elk stands for elk, we stand for bow hunters. Just as NDA stands for deer, we stand for bow hunters. So if you're a bow hunter, you absolutely should be a part of Pope and Young, because we are the ones, again, as these issues come up with the Florida deal, like, yeah, we care about the bears in Florida, but we're looking at this as, how does this affect bow hunters? How does this move the sport of bow hunting forward? And that is the lens that we look through all of the conservation issues through. So absolutely, you should be a member of Pope and Young. Justin, man, we just wrapped up our membership drive. Had a few awesome winners. Got to call them today. Had some pumped up people with some prizes they won. About to give away a javelina target because we just introduced javelina, which was an exciting time. So if you have a javelina, talk to him about the hunt that we're going to be giving away for those who have a javelina and get it entered.
Yeah, so anybody that gets an entry scored and submitted by the deadline on that contest, you are going to be entered to win a spot on a hunt with the Pope and Young board. There's a handful of them that I believe they got a hunt going in Texas. And so if you have a javelina skull and get it entered, you might be able to go down and spend a few days hunting with them. You'd be responsible for getting there and licensed, but they've got the hunt covered, the food, the whatnot. And, great opportunity. And, again, for us to really set a baseline and know what javelina populations are doing, we have to have entries. And so that's why they're stepping up and offering up this spot to hunt with them if you get your javelina scored and entered.
And it is for 2 javelina and hogs down in Texas, which if you've never bow hunted javelina, it's one of the funnest things that you could ever do. It is right up there with a fresh glazed dozen from Krispy Kreme as far as one of my favorite things. So definitely, if you've got a javelina laying around and you look at it and you think, man, it's a pretty big javelina, find a measure, go to pope-young.org. There's a page, find a measure. You can put in your location and find the measure nearest you and get with them. It's free to have it measured. You might as well. And then if it makes it, you pay the fee to put it in and you're going to be entered into a incredible drawing for an awesome hunt. So make sure and go get on that. Javelina, again, the introduction of that into the record books is nothing more than a conservation win. It's nothing more than showing that the North American model of wildlife conservation works and that these states are managing for javelina. And so that is, again, just another win on the checkmark box for wildlife conservation. So get your javelina, find you a measure, get them entered. If you don't have a javelina, go to Texas, New Mexico, Arizona, or Old Mexico and kill one, get it entered. That's all I'm going to say about that. Justin, man, thank you so much. Yeah, go ahead.
I was going to say the other thing on that Florida bear hunt that, maybe talk to the listeners about is, you're seeing some stuff out there that's referring to it as a trophy hunt. And obviously I wouldn't suggest getting on an internet forum of anti-hunters and trying to make this argument, but, if someone that you're close to that respects you, you hear them say this is a trophy hunt, this would be a prime opportunity to say, no, in fact, this is not. What do you consider a trophy hunt? And what they're going to say is, well, they're just killing the bears for their skulls or their hides. Man, this is the time to educate them that bears are delicious. In most states, what they consider a trophy hunt isn't even legal in the U.S. They're wanton waste laws. You must retrieve that meat. You must utilize that meat. This is a hunt just like a deer hunt. I'm a big bear hunter, and one of the biggest reasons that I am is because the meat of them is amazing. My family eats bear hams.
Yeah,
we eat sweet and sour bear. We eat, bear pepperoni, sandwiches. I mean, it's a major component of what we eat. And, when we're bear hunting, yeah, we have some bear hides. Yeah, we have some skulls proudly on the wall, but every bit of that meat is being utilized. And this Florida hunt is no different. It's a state sanctioned hunt where, people can go out and get bear. And bears, yes, it has trichinosis. It has a higher rate of trichinosis in it. The U.S. pork supply had this, I believe, until up into the 70s. It wasn't like we weren't eating pork. You just had to be a little more careful on how you cooked it. Bear is no different. You cook it up to the recommended temperatures. The USDA says whatever to kill trichinosis, you are 100% fine. No, don't eat it raw. Don't make, raw bear steaks or something. But there's plenty of ways you can cook it and keep it at temperature and take care of that trichinosis and be completely safe in feeding that to your family.
Yeah. And for everybody that says I'm not eating bears because they have trichinosis, I'm like, but you eat chicken. You could die from eating chicken. You eat eggs. I mean, they're like no, I don't want to say they're every meat, but most meat you need to cook to a certain temperature in order to be safe to eat. And bear's no different. Like, I don't know why it's such a feared thing. Like, yeah, cook it to kill the trichinosis and then enjoy it. And if you're scared to eat bear meat, here's what I'm going to say. Fly out to Montana, buy you an airline ticket to Montana, fly into Missoula, Montana, call Justin Spring, say, hey, I'm at the airport. Come get me. And he'll take you out to his house. And if you've been scared to eat bear meat, Miss Becca, with the help, he's like the sous chef, with the help of Justin, will make you bear meat. And from that moment on, you'll be scared not to eat bear, like, because it is incredible. If you've ever had Miss Becca's pepperoni, you're like, I need to book a bear hunt. Like, that's what I need to do so I can have pepperoni. Bear meat is phenomenal. It's incredible table fare. So good for Florida. Now you don't have to eat gators anymore. You can eat bear meat.
Significantly better than gator.
Significantly better. 100%. Yeah. In every way. If you're a hunter, you need to pay attention. And of course you're a hunter because you're listening to the Typical Sportsman podcast. One of my favorite products of all time, Ancient. They make moccasins, quiet moccasins for stalking, or stalkisins, if you will. These things are absolutely dead quiet. I put them to the test just by sneaking through the house to see if I could sneak up on my wife. And they worked. Shot bears with them, chased elk with them. I've shot deer with them. These things hold up. Why? Because they're 100% American made with real leather. Phenomenal products. They are making old school cool again. Guys, listen, if you like to stock up on animals, any kind of stalking, turkey hunting, bear hunting, deer hunting, elk hunting, if you want to get close to animals, you have to walk quietly. I would highly, highly encourage you to go check out Ancient. That's ANXYNT. These are the coolest shoes you'll ever wear. I even rock them. I rock them as everyday drivers. Just headed to Walmart because they look stinking dope. Guys, go check them out. Use code Typical Sportsman. It's going to save you 10%, which doesn't sound like a lot, but here's what I'm going to tell you. You're not going to find a discount on these anywhere else. Go check out Ancient. Get you a pair of the baddest shoes you've ever owned and walk quieter and get closer. There are very few things that I have with me every time I'm in the outdoors. Whether I am upland hunting, deer hunting, elk hunting, just out shooting my bow, out checking trail cameras, very few things that are always with me. One thing that I always have with me is my binocular harness. And I searched the world for what I felt to be the best binocular harness. In my opinion, there's a fine line in binocular harnesses. Either you get a lot of space for everything you need, but they're big, bulky, and heavy, or they're super streamlined and I just don't have space for everything that I want to have on my chest. Alaska Guide Creations makes phenomenal harnesses. Guys, I wear them all the time. I wear my harness probably every day at some point in my day. And so comfortability is important to me. The way that it stays put where I want it is important to me, but also having enough compartments and being able to move things around modularly to fit it where I want it is also really important to me. I want my rangefinder in a certain place. I want my knife in a certain place. I want my binos to fold out in a certain way. And with Alaska Guide Creations, they have a full line of binocular harnesses that you can make exactly how you want them. I can put different pockets right where it's going to work best for me and my system. Guys, Alaska Guide Creations is the best, hands down, in my opinion, harness you can get, and take it from a guy who pretty much lives in them. Go check out Alaska Guide Creations for your next and your last bino harness. Guys, thank you so much for listening. Justin, thank you so much for bringing to light some of these issues, for helping us understand this better. Guys, thank you so much for listening. If you're not a member of Pope & Young, go to pope-young.org, click join now at the very top, and become a member of Pope & Young right now. There's no better time to join than now. Get in the fight, join the fight, take a stand with Pope & Young so that you can have a voice as these issues come up, so that you can know that your voice is being heard as a bow hunter. So go to pope-young.org and click join now. But everyone Thank you so much for listening. Keep the dusty side up.